Hello, welcome to Record Sports Hotline Live. My name is Daniel Caw, and the gentleman there texting on his phone is the one and only Keith Jackson.
Putting it onto silent like a professional ought to, Daniel.
Absolutely consummate professional. How are you?
I'm okay. I've actually, do you know what? I actually had a really enjoyable day today in the company of Willie Collum. Now, there's a sentence I never thought that I would hear myself saying, but yes, we were invited down to Hampden to meet with Willie Collum, head of referees, and Martin Atkinson, who's an interesting guy as well. And we were given a sort of briefing on changes that will be made to officiating in the coming season, discussions that the referees Willie Collum has had with his own referees, but also with the clubs and players and managers. It was actually really interesting. I really enjoyed it. And we went through a few scenarios, what constitutes red cards, for example, the handball rule. It was actually really, really interesting. It went on for a long time. But and then obviously there was a bit of writing to do after it. But yeah, it was really, I found it really quite interesting. I think one of the things, and it, you know what, when they were talking about it, I remembered, but I'd completely forgotten about this. And there'll probably be some fans out there as well that won't realise it. But there's one of the big changes for next season, Daniel, will be the implementation of the 8-second rule for goalkeepers.
Okay.
So Willie Collum was talking us through that, showing us like video of how it works. You know, once a goalkeeper has got the ball under control, he'll have 8 seconds to distribute it. And if he doesn't, and if he falls foul of it, then a corner kick will be awarded to the opposition, which is a big change, actually.
Aye.
And I think they're not going to be, you know, overly fussy about it. I don't think they're going to be sitting there, that's 8.1 seconds. But it's just in the general sort of a spirit of the game, if you like. If they feel that goalkeepers are deliberately, you know, taking or trying to waste time, effectively.
Is that a particular problem? Is that something that really needed dealt with? I've never really...
I think it is, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think... Look, how many times have you seen, and they showed clips of that today, how many times have you seen a goalkeeper come for an easy ball, right? Ball's up in the air, nobody around him, easy one to go and collects it and then falls to the ground. Many times you've seen that. Needlessly, without reason, falls to the ground. And what does that do? It just means the clock ticks over, and instead of the ball being distributed immediately, it can be 20, 30 seconds before it's bought. And I think that is, in terms of fan enjoyment, match day experience, whatever you want to call it, you know, one of the things that does annoy supporters, I think, is the amount of time that the ball is out of play or not in play.
Yeah.
You know, you can watch 90 minutes, a game that lasts 90 minutes, but there might only be 60 minutes of actual football played in that game.
If that, aye.
So this is a plan to sort of speed that up and to make sure that the goalkeepers aren't guilty of wasting time, counting down the clock, whatever you want to call it. And I'm all for it. I think it's a good idea. I'll be interested to see its implementation, what that looks like in Scottish football, because there always is the potential for people to interpret rules in a very strange way in Scottish football, particularly our referees, and we give them a hard time, and I know that. But it was quite, that's what I enjoyed as well about going down and speaking with Willie Collum. We were invited to have opinions on what we felt, some of the decisions, were they right, were they wrong, various red cards, all that sort of thing. And it was a really interesting discussion because, you know, you've got your view as a supporter, I've got my view as a reporter, managers will have their view from the dugout, players will have their view for on the pitch, but it's interesting to get the referees' insight. I didn't agree with all of it, I have to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
There was some peculiar stuff, but I enjoyed it nonetheless, so it was good.
Some comments coming in. If you want to get involved in the conversation, please do so. We'll try and read out your comments. Luke Skywalker is all for those changes, Keith. He says, I'm all for it. And he says it's great changes to cut out the cheating. But Scott says that rule will lead to more inconsistency. And he says, just add more time on, surely. Ali says, well, it used to be 9 seconds, so it's not changed much, Keith. Every other sports play the same rules, but in football, it's
there's a difference, which I'll explain if you don't mind, now that I'm up to speed by Willie Collum. The difference previously was it would, I think the punishment was an indirect free kick given to the opposition.
Yep.
Willie Collum said that he, in his entire career, I think he said as a referee, never actually penalised a keeper for taking too long on the ball, because one of the most difficult things for a referee was to organise an indirect free kick situation inside the penalty box, where it's bodies all over the shop and it's chaos, and you've seen it, these scrambles. So he said referees were naturally reluctant to utilise that rule or to implement it, because it would lead to a potentially really tricky situation to have to officiate. So I think by awarding a corner, that makes it a whole lot more simple. And yeah, I'm in favour of it. I'm in favour of it. There are interesting stuff as well about what constitutes a penalty kick when shirts are getting pulled, all sorts of things that were interesting. And there was a really, really, really interesting bit, Daniel, that it turns out that yesterday, Willie Collum invited 2 jet pilots into Hampden to speak to Scotland's top officials and give them a sort of tutorial on the art of communicating in a crisis situation. And that, is...
That's one of them there.
Roger. So this is all the aim of helping to streamline the communications between the officials on the pitch and VAR at Clydesdale House. And I think it's not. I see the logic in it. It's simple. It's about staying calm, concise, and composed when you're having these discussions. Because you're talking. The example is these jetline pilots. There was an example cited, I think, where an engine catches fire on a passenger plane. And I look at some of the kind of video and audio that we get from Clydesdale House over the last wee while, and it does sound at times as if there are men running about the place with their hair on fire. What would they be like in a situation where the engine's just caught fire here? So, but the point being, the pilot, calm as you like. Oh, control, yes, slight problem with the aircraft. What's that? Well, one of the engines is on fire. Oh, right, okay, so what we're going to do about that? Well, I think what we'll do is we'll just turn round and stay nice and calm and just land it back at the airport. Whereas we've got Andrew Dallas running about in his underpants, pencils up his nostrils. Oh, see, I don't know, penalty kick. So I think there's logic in that, and I think it's actually something that they did down in England. A pilot scheme, let's call it. Oh, sorry.
Listen, we're going to wrap up early tonight, guys.
Where they get similar aviation experts to go and speak to the guys down there. And I think that it was Martin Atkinson that was saying that they got the benefit of that. They really felt there was a benefit to it in terms of just when you're in that high pressure situation, remember, it's about being clear and concise, factual, and try and stay calm.
Is this Martin Atkinson's idea then? Is it him that sort of brought this to the table?
I think it probably is, yeah. That seemed to be the gist of it. I think he comes from a police background as well. So he kind of sees the importance of being able to communicate to the command centre or whatever it is. And obviously he was down south, he experienced it, and I think that he felt the guys in England benefited from it. So why not? Look, do you know what? I've said it once, I've said it 100,000 times. Our referees need every last bit of help they can get, and you can take that whatever way you want to take it. Yeah. But it's a really hard job, and human error is a big part in it. Confusion, a little bit of chaos. We've heard some of these audios from VAR, and it's been a really bad, really difficult listen at times. It doesn't reflect well. So if they're finding a way to make this more professional, if there's define the protocol a little bit better, define the language more clearly, then I think that's only going to help. And there's also the potential, as we were discussing, Willie, the potential for Scotland. There have been now discussions about improving the match day experience for supporters, which I think is a real bugbear for guys, the paying punters, the guys that are going to stadiums. They're the last ones. They're the ones that are kept in the dark.
You've not got a clue what's going on.
People can be sitting at home and at least they've got the TV commentary to tell them, yep, VAR are doing X, Y, and Z. The guys that have actually shelled out to go to the games, the guys that are the lifeblood of football in this country, they're the ones that are sitting there and not got a clue.
Aye.
Having to phone home. What were they saying? So I think that there have been, I know there have been discussions which would allow the matchday referee to explain to the people inside the stadium, the most important people of all, what is actually going on when he's called to a screen for a VAR review. And I think that would be a major step forward. And there is the possibility that could be rolled out. That could come into our game this season. But it's obviously going to depend on the clubs being agreeable to fund it. And I don't think it's fortunes for something like this. I don't think the technology involved would be, the cost of it would be prohibitive. And I think there is a consensus, whether it's the governing bodies, the clubs themselves, supporters, liaisons. I think everybody realises that the punters are the ones that are being shortchanged here. And anything that we can do to make the experience of actually attending a match in Scotland a bit better, then I think it should be done. And that's another thing that I would really welcome, Daniel, if that was to bear fruit.
Absolutely. In the comments, Mark says, this is all absolute rubbish. He says, jet pilots, sure it wasn't a couple of rockets. John says, Beaton needs putting in an ejector seat out of refereeing. Ali says, if a ref or linesman can't see that handball in the Rangers game, then God help us. This season, friendly or not friendly, totally embarrassing standards. Scott says, incompetence is the biggest problem. So, a very mixed reaction to today's talks with Willie Collum.
I wonder what the guys think of this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where Willie and I had a bit of a disagreement. Not the first, but anyway, he showed some footage. In this incident, he said wasn't even picked up by VAR. I don't think it was raised much of discussion. It was a game between Celtic and Hibs. I think it might have been a cup game last season. And Triantis of Hibs goes into what looks like a fairly innocuous challenge, run about the halfway line. I think it might have been on Rio Hatate. And we were all asked, right, what should that be? And I said, I'm not even sure it's a foul, but carry on. So then they go to slow motion replays. And true enough, the slow motion replays, various angles, you can see that Triantis has actually got his studs raked down the back. I think it's Hatate's leg. And so then the discussion is, well, what should that be? My own sort of thoughts were probably yellow card, because you could tell from the way that Triantis went in, it was a genuine attempt to get to the ball, but he was coming from an awkward angle, and the Celtic player's leg went at an awkward angle. It was a coming together, but there was no malice or intent in it, right? And Willie Collum agreed to that. But he actually said, no, VAR should have pulled that up. They should have made the ref go to the screen, and it should have been a red card. And I said to Willie, what you're saying there is that you're accepting that there was no attempt to injure the player there. It was a genuine attempt to get to the ball, and it was just through sheer bad fortune on the part of Triantis that his leg happens to go where the Celtic player's leg goes. And he said, yeah, I accept all that, yeah. So I says, well, they're giving out red cards now for just people being unlucky. Well, that's what we think. And then he showed another couple when there was a Lennon Miller tackle. I think it might have been on Oscar Cortez of Rangers. And I think that the decision was made on the pitch. I'm not even sure they gave a foul. And by the way, I have to tell you, looking at it, I didn't think it was a foul. He's kind of come through from behind. You know that way when the ball's there to be won and you kind of wrap a leg around it to bring it back to into your body.
Yep.
And turn. And it was actually, for me, brilliant. A bit of brilliant skill because tackling is a skill. Mm-hmm. Brilliant bit of skill by Lennon Miller. But in the process of doing it, his right boot extends and hits the ankle, I think, of Cortez. For me, it's not a free kick. For me, it's just a really, good challenge. And I did say, well, Willie, this is a contact sport. You can't have a situation. I said, just because, and it froze, and when it froze, it didn't look particularly clever. But in the context of the actual movement and the tackle itself, you can see there was certainly no malice in it. And he agreed that that one should have been a yellow. But he said if Cortez's leg was actually further down or planted, then it could be even nasty. I said, so again, it's nothing to do with what Lennon Miller does. It's just fortune. It's just whether he's lucky or unlucky.
Yeah.
It's not the actual tackle that is deserving of a red card. It's how lucky you are as to the positioning of people's limbs.
Right.
So that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense to me. And we left it at that. But I'll be interested to see, because clearly this is a main topic that they've been discussing, and clearly, even if it looks innocuous, even if there's no intent in it, even if there's no malice, even if it's not particularly reckless, I'm a little bit concerned about what that looks like when the new season starts, because if people are studying these tackles from every conceivable angle to find one that they don't like the look of, then that would be a worry. And I did express this point quite firmly to Willie today.
Well, if you want to let us know your thoughts on Keith's big day out with the referees, please do so, and we'll try and address that.
My big afternoon down Willie Collum's rabbit hole.
I was going to say so. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Back to the actual football, though. Mikey writes in. He says, if Celtic don't have two wingers in for this Champions League playoff game and they get papped out, the board are going to get so much criticism. Now, Mikey is just one of several, Keith, that have written in. Pretty livid about their teams. In fact, let me just read a couple of them for you. Let me have a look. If I can find them, that would be good.
That would be helpful, Daniel.
Yep. Kenny says, with the new season starting this weekend, I never thought we'd be heading into it with a squad without any major investment. It's an absolute joke. More money in the bank than ever, and it's a kick in the teeth to fans ploughing money constantly into the club. The manager walks, I wouldn't blame him. The biscuit tin days are back. And Joe says, could somebody ask the Celtic board what their transfer policy is in terms of bringing in quality players? Reported bids of 1.5 million for players are akin to those made by English four-tier clubs. Frankly, are a disgrace and an insult to all Celtic fans. What's happened to the £70 million profit the board were congratulating themselves at making last season? I mean, this is off the back, Keith. Since we last did the hotline last night, Celtic have been linked with a loan move.
Yes, they have, Daniel. And ever since I heard about this potential loan move, I've been very much looking forward to hearing how you pronounce it.
Aye, so the Man City boy.
Yeah,
Jamai, no, it's not even Jamai Simpson Pusey.
Pusey, you say? That's interesting. Okay.
No, I think Pusey. I think, look, listen,
Pusey.
I think we're better than this, aren't we?
Nah.
Come on. Nah, we're not, are we?
I thought you were going to go with the in-betweeners. Pussy.
Yeah. We'll get those T-shirts for tomorrow's show. But Celtic fans are obviously not best pleased. And bringing a player in loan as well, like without an option to buy. And I know he's really highly rated at Man City. I get they've had success in the past. You think like Denier. Shouldn't they really be, trying to develop a player like Dane Murray, say?
It's a difficult one. Talk me through this. Is he a right-sided centre-half or a left-sided centre-half?
I think he's right-sided, I think.
So he's basically would be coming in then to offer a bit of cover for Cameron Carter-Vickers. And Celtic fans would probably be the first to say there'd be, a bit of serious concern if Cameron Carter-Vickers gets an injury that keeps him out for any length of time. I don't see a problem with it. I think this is a really talented young player. I've read some quotes from Pep Guardiola, who seems to think that this boy could be, a big player for Manchester City in the years going forward. But obviously needs game experience, some game time. And I think he would get a bit of that. I don't think, obviously, he'd be a first pick starter in this Celtic side, not in front of Cameron Carter-Vickers. But I think he'd be a very useful addition. And, I'm not a great lover of loan players, but more and more as football goes the way football's going, I do see the logic in it, particularly for Scottish clubs, because it might be a way of getting a hold of a player that otherwise, ordinarily, is just not going to be possible for you to get. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about a similar proposition Rangers have made with a very exciting young player at Spurs, I'm sure. But, for example, the Rangers fans, I'm sure they really enjoyed having Vaclav Černý at the club last season. And yeah, I think it's regrettable. I'm sure that supporters, because they invest emotionally in these guys, and I'm sure that it would be preferable for the clubs to enter into agreements if there is the chance of getting a deal done at the end of it to make it, you know, if the guy's good, you make it permanent. And Celtic have done that before with Cameron Carter-Vickers as a perfect example. With this one, because the way Pep's been talking about the kid, you would think it would be unlikely that Celtic would be able to make this a longer term arrangement. But 12 months loan, why not? I really don't see what's problematic about that. It's only problematic when you take it in the context of this current transfer window and the optics of what it looks like for Celtic right now, which isn't great. And you can tell that the Celtic fans are running out of patience, and understandably so. You would have thought, and they, I think, had every right to believe that by this point, 5 days before the season kicks off, that Celtic would have done a little bit more heavy lifting in the transfer market. Brendan Rodgers should be sitting just now with those 2 or 3 or 4 players that he believes increases the quality of his strongest 11, and he's not. And that is, it's not a great look.
Yeah.
And I do think, and I'll come back to it because I keep saying it, I do think that Celtic will do business. I think they will spend significant money, but I think they've misjudged this time. And I'm sure there are reasons for it. You know, they're not doing this deliberately to, you know, antagonise their own supporters or you know, make themselves targets for the support and the abuse that obviously they'll be getting. None of that's done deliberately, so there will be reasons. But even so, you know, it's the old, well, you've got one job. That's the job. And Celtic should be better equipped at this point, even though the ball's not started rolling yet. They should be better equipped than they currently are with so little time to go. 1, ahead of the start of the league campaign, but 2, and of, you know, even more importance, the Champions League qualifiers, which are less than a month away now. And you know what it's like that if one of these guys that you're targeting as a possible potential marquee arrival, if he's coming from a big league or a big club, well, the chances are he's still on his holidays just now, because they're only just getting back about it, some of them. So there will be a bit of time required to get the pre-season work done. And also, more importantly than that, probably, is the fitting into the structure and the system and acclimatising to a new environment. All that stuff requires a little bit of time. And Celtic have got themselves into the position now, which I didn't think they'd be in, where it's the clock's starting to tick on. And we were talking way before the end of last season about the situation Rangers were facing and the need for many of these matters to be addressed before the end of last season. And Celtic weren't in that similar sort of traumatic period where they were losing managers. Celtic were in a stable condition at this point. And I think the fans are right to expect that, given those circumstances, as well as the money that's sitting in the bank right now, that Celtic should be in a better position than they are right now, albeit I do think they'll get there. But I think along the way they're going to face a bit of criticism.
Well, the criticism's coming. Green Machine says Celtic's transfer business has always been up for scrutiny, more so now because of the money in the bank. John says the tight board are waiting to see how we do in the qualifiers before slightly releasing the purse strings. Do you think that's accurate?
I've heard it said, and I understand the theory and the thinking behind it, but I find it hard to believe, given the sort of piles of cash that Celtic have got, under lock and key at the bank right now through year after year of really clever business. Champions League last year, player sales, player trading model. They're in a really robust financial position. And I would struggle to argue the case of the board if they were saying, I know we've got loads of money, but we need loads more before we're going to spend anything. That's not justifiable.
Yeah.
And it certainly won't wash with the Celtic supporters.
In fairness, Ian counters by saying the business done by Celtic so far is superb. 4 million for Tierney, Negren, Yamada and Amura, and Callum Osmond. Plenty of window left, more will follow. I think I made this point last week when I said that, look, see if Celtic had pushed the boat out and maybe spent 10, 12 million to get Tierney back and 6 or 7 for Negren, which he could have cost in another window. I think Celtic fans would be a bit more relaxed.
Possibly, certainly Kieran Tierney is a massive signing for Celtic. But I think the concern will be, and I've hinted at this, that felt to me, that decision to sign Kieran Tierney felt to me as if it was an extension to last summer when Brendan Rodgers was clearly given a greater degree of influence in how Celtic spent their money and what level of players they were going for. And part of that will be the financial terms that would have had to have been involved in inducing Kieran Tierney. Even though Kieran Tierney was desperate to come back to Celtic, he's not doing it for buttons. He's not doing it for charity. Of course, Celtic won't have matched what he was earning at Arsenal, but they'll have needed gone quite some distance towards it. And that is a segue away from Celtic's previous model. They simply wouldn't have done it. They simply wouldn't have put a financial package like that on the table for any player of that age. That's just not the way Celtic's model worked. Neither is the £9 million for Ida, the £11 million for Engels, and to a lesser extent the £6 million spent in Trusty last summer. But you felt that was a clear move away, a pivot away from the Celtic model that has, and you have to say it's worked tremendously well over the years, but this was clearly felt as if there was more of Brendan Rodgers' fingerprints on it. And I think the Kieran Tierney signing was an extension of that summer. So where are we now? This is the interesting point. Where are we this summer? Have they pivoted back? And it is just, this is the way we've always done it. And do you know what, Brendan? We feel it works better financially this way. So we're going to do it again. Or, as we've said, is it a hybrid? And over the course of the remaining weeks of the transfer window, will Brendan Rodgers get the opportunity to do something similar to what he did last summer? I still strongly suspect that's what happens. But I think even if Brendan Rodgers believes that's going to be the case, I think he'll be getting a little bit frustrated now because managers want these players in as quickly as possible to get them, integrated into the squad and familiar with the playing style and their teammates, etc., etc.
And I get that obviously there's still 5 weeks in the transfer window to go, but you mentioned the Champions League playoff. The cut-off for that, to play in that two-legged tie, is August the 14th. So a lot sooner than the end of
So it's a
couple
couple
August.
of weeks.
Like 2 weeks, basically. Luke wants to know, does Keith think Celtic will make the group stages? I think he means the league phase of the Champions League. And if they don't, will Brendan run?
Well, I think you would look at Celtic's performances in the group stages last season, and it should give them a lot of confidence going into the qualification doubleheader. And we don't yet, obviously, can't answer that question until you know who they're up against for a start.
Yeah.
But they are seeded in the draw. The teams that are in the draw that they could come up against, there's some decent, competent teams there. There's no doubt about it, and they'll be challenging matches. But I think Celtic would have the quality. They've also got that little bit of experience and know-how, which I think I think that horror night in Dortmund has gone, a long way to Celtic growing up as a European team. I felt there was a different, more mature, coming of age kind of look about what Celtic did on the pitch after that game last season. These are big learning moments, and Celtic are able to carry that experience into these qualifiers, you would expect at least a couple of new faces brought in to bolster things, beef things up ahead of these games. So yeah, I would, I would think there's plenty of reason for Celtic to be confident, albeit we don't yet know who they'll be facing. And would Brendan Rodgers cut and run? Was that the second part of that question?
Yeah, if they don't get
Celtic
there.
failed, nah,
No
Brendan
chance.
Rodgers won't be cutting and running anywhere.
If anything, look, I get Celtic won't even want to entertain this, Celtic fans. Having a tilt at the Europa League wouldn't be the worst thing. I know they'd lose a lot of money, but if you go into the later stages, you still make a good bit of money. They'll look at what Rangers have done in recent years and think, well, if they can get to a final, a quarter final.
It's not a disaster, but
No,
it's not a good thing. It's not a positive move. It's a
Aye, of
backward
course.
step.
I'd
It's a
accept that.
retrograde for a club which wants to consider itself a Champions League club, and for a manager who thoroughly enjoyed his group stage experience last year in the kind of extended version of the group stages. I think it was a really enjoyable experience for Celtic's players, Celtic supporters, but most of all Celtic's manager. And I think he wants another tumble around with it with these sort of teams in the big boys' playground. So yeah, I think anything other than the Champions League, it's not a disaster, but it's not a good thing either. And I don't think it could be described as such, Daniel.
Aye. And I'm getting a bit stick already for that. But you listen, worst things have happened.
Straight and to the point, Mark.
That's it. Aye, thanks for that, Mark. Across the city, Keith, more transfer news for Rangers. Celtic seems to be a bit quieter, but certainly not Ibrox. Mikey Moore is the latest name who appears to be arriving at Ibrox pretty soon. He's the
I think there's a bit of work to do in that, to be fair,
Okay.
Daniel. Certainly there are discussions between the clubs, and I think the player is very open to it. But I still think there's a bit of work to do before that deal can be completed. Just negotiation stuff between Rangers and Spurs. But I think in principle, everybody's up for it, including Spurs. Thomas Frank, the manager, sees the sense in it. The player seems to be quite excited at the prospect of it. And I think Rangers will be really excited by it because they're calling this kid potentially a generational talent down there, aren't they? I think
very
for me,
highly rated.
he's 17, right? So a lot of learning to do. You would imagine he'll be a bit wet behind the ears, but Ange Postecoglou was willing to play him on more than a few occasions last season.
He made 20 appearances.
Yeah,
last
well,
season.
exactly.
I mean, 20. I mean, that's a lot for a big club like Tottenham.
And especially for a kid as young as that.
Aye.
And he's clearly a boy that really excites Spurs. And again, how the Rangers fans, you let us know, Rangers fan, how do you feel about it? Because I think the prospect of seeing a kid of this level of ability in a Rangers shirt, even if it's just for a season, I think they should be fairly excited about that. They obviously, I made the comparison to Czerny earlier. I'm sure they enjoyed watching Czerny last season. I'm sure there'll be many of them who wished that deal had been made more permanent and that Czerny was still part of the ranks just now, because that was a possibility when the loan deal was originally struck. There's no possibility of Mikey Moore becoming a Rangers player on a more permanent basis.
Yeah.
So how do the fans feel? I don't know. For me, just the idea of looking, getting to see a kid that's clearly, in terms of what the expectations are at Spurs, they believe he's destined for huge things in the game. So I think that should be quite exciting, the idea of it. And I think it's part of the wider recruitment plan that Russell Martin is trying to activate this summer, and that, it's not a case of just, sign 2 wingers, because we all know, this is Scottish football, injuries happen. And sometimes, particularly, wide players are targeted. So I think that, the Rangers right now, what are we thinking? That they're in discussions about 3 potential deals for wingers: Mikey Moore, Raksaki at Crystal Palace, and Oliver Antman at Go Ahead Eagles. and there's probably more that Rangers are looking at. I think if they could get with Gassama in the door already, that's one. I think Russell Martin's probably looking to get at least 3, perhaps 4.
But then,
guys
so
to give him those options in the wider areas.
sorry to jump in, Keith, but then you think Gassama, right? And technically, I know it wasn't Russell Martin, but they've paid what, £3 million for Cortez this summer. So you get Gassama, Cortez, Mikey Moore, Antman. Who was the other one?
Mikey Moore, Oliver Antman, Raksaki at Palace.
Raksaki. I mean, that feels like a lot to me. Surely they won't. You wouldn't have thought they would get all 3 of Moore, Raksaki, and Antman.
No, you wouldn't. But I would think that he probably wants another 2 at least.
Aye, that makes sense.
And I don't think that Cortez is. I just don't see any signs that he's going to grow into that shot and give a proper contribution. Yeah, I just don't see. I might be wrong. Maybe Russell Martin will have seen something in him that nobody else has up until this point. But no, that just looks like another major misadventure in the transfer market from a recruitment department, which was, I don't know how you would say it, performing quite horribly over a period of time. And you know, look, there you go. The evidence in front of your eyes. Robin Propper's away back after a year. You know, the deal for Cortez never seemed to make any sense at all. And there's a list as long as your arm of signings that Rangers probably regret that they ever made in the first place. That's why another reason from a Rangers supporter's perspective, I'm sure there's a little bit more excitement about what's going on in this window, because it seems as if there's a plan underpinning everything that they're doing. It's not the scattergun approach, and it's not the summer of Sam Lammers or anything close to it.
Bluebell says Keith's way off. The deal is all but done and it will be announced soon. That's for Mikey Moore, I think he's meaning. And he also points out as well, McCausland is off to Limassol. Ross McCausland is off to join.
Yeah, well, that one's been talked about for a while.
And Leon Balogun. So I mean, I've been saying this to you for weeks now, but I just want the season to start. I like all this transfer stuff, but I've had my fill of it now. Can we just get back to playing football? That'd be great.
We're almost there, Dan. We're almost there, man.
No, we're almost there. This is a sentence that I never thought I'd say, Keith. Aberdeen are in for AC Milan striker Marko Lazetic.
Yeah.
Lazetic. Jesus. I mean, he's a young boy, but he does play for AC Milan. He was very highly rated a few years ago. He's only 21. But an interesting one.
Well, it's interesting, and not least because I think Aberdeen were trying to get a deal done for him in January, and I think they came really close to getting a deal done for him in January, but it fell through at the 11th hour. So he's obviously a player that Aberdeen have had their eye on for a good while now, and it seems as if AC Milan would be willing to help facilitate some sort of deal here. I don't know what the deal would look like, whether it's a loan with an option or whatever. Or a straight-out transfer. I don't know the details on it, but I do know that Aberdeen have been sniffing around this player, have been really interested in him for a good 6 months or so now, probably longer than that. And again, it's another really encouraging sign of the intent that the Hibs, the Aberdeens, the Hearts are showing this summer. The people are really having a crack at this now. And who would have thought, you know, Aberdeen would even be linked to the prospect of trying to sign a striker from AC Milan. This is, and I don't feel as if it's reckless spending either. You know, I think Scottish football knows the limits, its own limitations financially. But they're being shrewd and they're being adventurous and they're thinking outside the box, and I really like it.
Yeah.
And if Aberdeen could land a player like this with his, albeit he's, as you said, Daniel, 21, but you know, I think he played at Red Star. I think that's where, you know, he sort of ablazed his way to recognition there, and obviously so much so that AC Milan took interest. Yeah, so why wouldn't you want to see a player like that going to a Scottish club, and hopefully having an impact in this league? This is why I've got such a good feeling about what we're about to get served up over the course of the next 10 months or whatever, Dan, because I just think this might be the best version of the Scottish top flight that we've seen in a considerable time. I think it's going to be really exciting. As
you can see there, Mark says it's exciting for the Dons. Rebel says they've got guaranteed European football as well, Keith.
Yeah, and that's such a key ingredient to this. And, some people have been saying it for a long time, and it's almost as if it's taken our clubs a while to actually really understand. They moan about TV deals, and I get all that domestically, but there are reasons for that, and we're never going to shift the dial. We're never going to get an EPL TV deal. So the way to make money in Scottish football, and you know what, it's not to put your hand out and tell other people to do their job, it's do your job. Because see, if you do your job right and you can get regular access to European football, that is where the money's at. Yeah. And it's always going to be that way. And it blows what you can earn in a good season of group stage European football. It'll blow away the kind of domestic sponsorship deals or TV deals. That's where you need to be at. And you're almost pushing at an open door because there's opportunities. European football is expanding, and there are more opportunities to get into group stage football. And I think it's dawned on these clubs now that that's worth investing in, because if you can get yourself into that regular European football group stage, you're almost unlocking a sort of jackpot in relative terms to what Scottish clubs have had to get by on in the past. European football's where it's at.
Mm-hmm. And Bluebell says, and I'm all for it, we need a better level of league, and that starts with better teams who can also hold their own in the likes of the conference early stages. And just before we finish, Keith, Robert says, going back to our chat about VAR, he says, could it be fixed with one member of each team and a neutral making decisions? I don't think there's legs in that, Robert. We could just have a boxing match by the side, but in the technical area, and see who comes out on top. That's an idea as well.
No, I don't think that one will fly. I don't think that one's got legs.
We appreciate the comment, though, Robert. Thank you for that. I think that brings us to the end of Monday night's Hotline Live with Record Sport. Thank you, as always, for all the comments. We massively appreciate it.
Yeah, our manpower is stretched, isn't it, Dan?
We're right down to the bare bones of the squad.
Yeah, but the good news is that we have deployed our resources. They're being spread out across the continent as we speak. And tomorrow night, we should have at least Scott McDermott coming on from Athens ahead of the second leg of the Panathinaikos versus Rangers Champions League tie, and maybe various others, Dan.
Well, listen, they'll need to fight us for the jerseys. I've heard people saying we're the best too. So look, I'm no hero. I don't want to go on about it.
Tell your mama say hi.
On that note, if you want to join us, we'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. to do it all again. Hope you can join us then. Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Evening, Dan.
Thanks for watching at home. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.